Holy crap. Was I just talking that entire time without my mic? What a blunder. What an absolute blunder. How come no one told me that my mic wasn't even on? I was just talking away and my mic wasn't even on. That's hilarious. Oh no. Okay, well, my mic is finally on. I'm just sitting here talking away and no one said anything to me. My mic was just off this entire time. Now I gotta do the entire intro over. Yo, 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 what is going on, my beautiful brothers and sisters, fellow radiators of love? My name is Jamal Pope, aka J Phoenix, and welcome to this week's installment of Cosmic Convergence, the weekly astrology horoscope, where I take a look at the celestial energies, see how they're dancing this week, and see, how can you be better prepared to navigate the week ahead. My mic is on, so you guys can finally actually hear my intro and stuff. So definitely got a good bit to talk about with this week. We have all this energy starting to move into Gemini. Sun is in Gemini right now, so happy birthday to all the Geminis, the Geminis out there. It is your birthday period, your solar return period. Of course, we are going to see Venus come into Gemini. We're going to see Jupiter come into Gemini. And we are going to see a full moon in Sag. And of course, this all kind of converges into the moon finishing up the week is going to be in Aquarius and start to trine all of this Gemini energy. Now, what's interesting about this week, I called this week the winds of change, and I have, of course, here this anime girl, just chilling in the fields, she seems rather content. And then you have the Greek god Zephyrus behind her, the Greek god of the western wind, and the most favorable of the wind gods in Greek lore. And we can really start to feel this week that change is afoot, that change is coming. Now, it may not be as fast as we want it to, and that has a lot to do with the fact that Mercury, of course, is still in Taurus. So we still have to build up some resiliency when it comes to that. And of course, Uranus will still be in Taurus by the end of this week as well. So even though the energy is starting to spread out a little bit, we got to remember that over the last several months, we have seen such a compact nature with the planet, such a compact energy, with all the energy being in Aries and Pisces and Taurus, right? And of course, we did have Pluto there in Aquarius getting ready to retrograde back into Capricorn, kind of just hanging out in the background, but all of the planets were pretty much within those three signs. Now things are starting to spread out a little bit, and we're going to see these energies, some of these energies start to shift into Gemini. This is going to bring about some much needed change. This is going to bring about a little bit of a lighter energy for some people, but it's also going to bring with it its fair share of challenges. Number one, these energies are going to start to square out the Neptune energy. This is definitely going to bring up mental health, I will say. This is going to bring up that sort of stuff. We're also going to see Jupiter, that's going to, of course, come into Gemini, and that's going to be in its detriment. We got to remember that Jupiter does rule Sagittarius, so now it's going to be in its detriment in Gemini, which I feel like this Jupiter in Gemini can be a really awesome transit for a lot of people, but it's not going to be awesome if you're unwilling to kind of break out of your own shell and to really put yourself out there a bit more. That's really what that's going to be about, and I could probably make an entire other video on this Jupiter in Gemini. I might just do that. But we can really start to feel that all of the energy that's been feeling stuck for a while. I remember speaking to someone, was it I think it was yesterday, we were talking about how April just kind of felt like it moved by very, very slowly. But May has gone by rather quickly. And I was like, yeah, I echo that sentiment. I think April did kind of go by slow. I feel like with the eclipses that happened at the end of March, and of course the solar eclipse that happened at the beginning of April, there was that last little bit of April, the last 3 weeks of April, that did kind of feel like time had slowed down. And I think it was a great period where the universe was allowing us to sort of collect ourselves so we can kind of observe where we are in this current reality. Where's our mindset? How are we responding and reacting to the world? Who are we? How are we acting? All these sort of things are coming up. Now energy is starting to spread out a little bit more with all the energy shifting into Gemini. Still rather compact, and even from like a Helios standpoint, all the planets are on one side of the sun. So there's still a compact nature to this, but we can feel that the winds of change are here. Now that we are in mutable air season, this is, of course, that month right before summer or winter if you're in the southern hemisphere. And we can, like I said, we can feel that things are beginning to shift, albeit rather slowly. It's not going to be immediate, if you will, but the winds of change are here. So let's go ahead, of course, and I'm going to pull up the charts here for the current moment. If you just give me 1 second so I can adjust this, and bam. Just like that, we are right here. So, at the current moment that I'm filming this, we do, of course, see that the sun is here at 1 degree of Gemini. So it has fully clicked into the sign of Gemini, and it is beginning to make its trine over to Pluto. We, of course, also have the moon here in Scorpio. And we have to remember, of course, that the moon is in its fall in Scorpio, so it doesn't necessarily feel the best here, right? But this does kind of bring up the sort of, we're feeling a little bit deeper into things. Things could feel even a little bit more psychological, if you will. But this moon, we're going to see it make oppositions, and it's already made an opposition to Mercury. That happened earlier in the day, actually. So if we just go back, pretty much in the morning, that's where we kind of started, was that moon and Scorpio opposing that Mercury and Taurus. This one, if I had to say what this sort of felt like, it's like Mercury is trying to still figure some things out. It's still wanting to catch up to, it's desperately trying to catch up to the sun. We'll say that because it's really wanting to get home to Gemini. It wants to write the scoop. I said this last week in my video that when Mercury comes back to Gemini, it is actually writing the scoop. It's writing the paper. It's writing the big story that it will break. It usually breaks the story in. Well, it breaks the story in Cancer because that's how people feel about it. And then Leo is like how everything kind of gets sensationalized. Virgo is in many ways sort of like the response. The critics kind of respond to the big story. And then Libra, of course, is when things kind of get a little bit interesting. People really start to feel like it's like, well, maybe this thing we should consider, or maybe we should consider this thing. This is where a lot of the debates may come up, is in Libra. And then once Mercury gets, of course, to Scorpio, that's when things get a little bit deeper, a little bit more psychological. And then Sag, I would say, is pretty much like the overall outcome of it. It's the opposite. And it's sort of like, these are sort of like the results of the big scoop that you're writing. But Mercury right now is in Taurus. So Mercury is gathering the final resources to write this big scoop, to write this big story, if you will. And it really wants to get to Gemini. And I think it is interesting, too. Mercury, of course, will conjunct the sun while it is in Gemini. Now, this moon in Scorpio opposing it, the moon in Scorpio wants things to feel a certain way, probably tapping a little bit more into desires. And Mercury and Taurus, this is about how we need to have a more resilient mindset when it comes to manifestation and when it comes to, building the life that we really want to build, and to attract those things into our life that we really want to attract. And that sounds all like foo-foo and like very new agey spiritual, but this is about being resilient of mind, that when things may not necessarily feel the best with that moon in Scorpio, maybe if we feel like our desires aren't being met, that we can still remain steadfast and move forward in a positive way, but of course, like I said, it comes down to a level of responsibility too, because this is 8 degrees. 8 is the number of Saturn. So there was a level of responsibility even here to remain mentally resilient in the face of, feelings of maybe we don't have everything that we desire, feeling like maybe we can't connect deeper to somebody because Scorpio is all about that, or feeling like maybe there could be, even though this is remnant from Libra, maybe the feeling that there's maybe even some unfairness that we may be experiencing in our life, So these are sort of the things that, kind of came up beginning into on Tuesday. And as, of course, we move the day forward, the moon, of course, comes off of that opposition to Mercury, if you will. Now, by the end of the day, we're not going to really see a whole lot besides the moon just kind of, that's not necessarily the case, too. Because I want to say that there is, let's see. I know that there was a yod that the moon made, but I want to say that that yod happened on Monday, where essentially it was making aspects, pretty much, that's what it was. It was making aspects to Neptune and Jupiter with the sun on Jupiter while it was at 29 degrees of Libra, which is something that I missed in my last transit, on my last cosmic convergence. I missed this, which is kind of nuts, but a yod is like a really important aspect. It's not something that you see every day, but it essentially involves two planets that are in sextile to each other, and both of those planets are making a quincunx over to another planet. In this case, it was the moon. Now, this was happening at 29 degrees, really started at 28 degrees, because Jupiter, the sun, and Neptune are involved here with the moon. Now, if I were to say what this was really about, as far as like kicking off the week, this was definitely about whether or not we can believe in our dreams and believe that we can build the life that we really want, but not fall for any of the delusions, right? Because that's the thing. Is like this could be about dreams, but it also could be about delusions. Not necessarily falling for delusions of grandeur. We still need to dream big, but not falling for delusions of grandeur, and not falling victim, I guess, to the South Node and Libra influence, where we start to, I guess, step into this more of this role of being a victim or outsourcing who we really are. I think that's the thing here. It's like, are you building your dream? Are you building someone else's dream? You know what I'm saying? I think that's really what this comes down to, especially with the sun here in Gemini now too, and it's a part of this whole yod that formed here. And you can even say Venus was too, because I'll say Venus is part of it too, because Jupiter has such a large influence that you can pretty much include it in the orb of influence. So this was a very major moment here on Monday. And like I said, coming into this Tuesday, then the moon moved into Scorpio. I was like, okay, how do you feel about all that? How do you feel about all this change that can happen? How do you feel about all this hard work that you could put in? How do you feel about, yes, you can make the biggest dreams come true right now, but it's not going to come simply by you thinking about it or believing in it. You have to actually do some work. I think that is the difficult part about this, is that we're being confronted with the reality of actually having to do the work. And I think in many ways that's what waking up on Tuesday was. This Tuesday was this whole moon opposing this Mercury, and pretty much coming face to face with the fact that, hey, if we are really going to be about it, we have to be a little bit more mentally resilient when things aren't going to go exactly the way that we want or the way that we plan. You gotta remember, Jupiter is always looking for the next fun thing or the next thing that's exciting. And being in Taurus, it's had to learn patience like a motherfucker. And that's the thing about it. It's like it's having to find the party in the everyday, the kind of seemingly mundane. And I'm not calling Taurus as mundane. All I'm saying is that while Jupiter has been there, it's been trying to find the party in the simplicity of things. So I think the other part of this whole yod and this whole experience, especially with the moon in Scorpio, is talking about, okay, where in life can you simplify things? Maybe there are some areas that are far too complicated right now. Can you simplify any area of your life? And by simplifying it, can you make it more efficient? And can you build from that? I think this is about building an efficient system, especially with Uranus involved here. And Uranus is very much so scientific and is about systems in many ways. It's random, it's out of nowhere, but it does like to look for some efficiency as well. So considering that we're going to see that moon oppose this Uranus on Wednesday, right? So we're going to see this moon hit 19 degrees, and then we're going to see it oppose Uranus here at 23 degrees, right? So this is definitely speaking to how can we make things a little bit more efficient in our lives. You know, this moon in Scorpio definitely has some desires that it wants. Being at 23 degrees, this is probably going to take on a little bit more of like a mental aspect, so this can get a little bit more psychological, right? And Uranus, of course, is here in Taurus. We're dealing with two planets that are in fall, right? We're dealing with two planets, two energies that are out of their element, right? In fact, I'd argue to say that these planets actually have somewhat mutual reception, because Uranus would rather be in Scorpio and the moon would rather be in Taurus. So that's the weird thing. They're both out of their element, but they can help each other. They can help each other understand the circumstances that they're in. Now, granted, the moon's not going to be in Scorpio for super, super long, right? The moon's going to move pretty fast. So, meanwhile, Uranus still has some time to stay in Taurus, right? This is going to be an interesting opposition, especially when you take into consideration that it is coming after these quincunxes to the Aries energy, right? The moon would have quincunx the North Node, Mars, and Chiron. So we get that awkward 150-degree angle to those, and then it opposes Uranus. Wednesday's probably going to feel a bit like a hump day, because we are wanting this change to occur in our life, and this is right before Venus is getting ready to conjunct Jupiter. So we have to kind of get over the hump of Wednesday. And this is really, in many ways, I see us as we have to kind of get out of our own way from like an emotional, psychological standpoint, because this moon in Scorpio is looking for something. It's going to be looking for something that is exciting. It's going to be looking for something that's spicy, right? Especially after quincunxing all the Aries energy. And it's going to make things kind of awkward. It's like, the spicy things are you looking for? Are you just looking to act on impulse? Is this based off of you expressing, the depth of your character and who you really are? Or are you outsourcing it and being someone that you're not? Or are you acting on impulse to try and cover up some type of wound or some type of trauma that you may be experiencing that you haven't learned from yet, that you haven't seen the lessons in that yet? Are you trying to cover up that part of it as well? So this opposition to Uranus is definitely going to be emotionally kind of looking for some type of solution, right? But Uranus doesn't necessarily do the best with emotions. Ironically, though, it likes to be in Scorpio, probably because it is the only place in water where it can Pisces can kind of escape. Let's be real. Pisces can kind of escape, but they still feel everything. Scorpio will literally wall off energy and create this boundary or this barrier so they can figure out their shit, right? So unless it's like the Scorpio energy where they're just emotionally dumping on people and then stinging people, because that can happen too. So that's the weird thing about this. We have this moment where it's like we have to sort of emotionally be like, okay, what systems do I value with the whole Uranus thing, right? What systems do I value? What people do I value, right? Uranus is also about the people, what collections, what societies, if there's also the sort of rebellious sort of quality to it, which is definitely, like I said, going to be even more enticing. You don't want to, on Wednesday, to make some sort of rash decision just to make yourself feel better, or what you think will make yourself feel better, just because you're looking for some sort of edge and you're looking for something random to happening, because you're just pushing and pushing and pushing and desiring some kind of change in your life. But are you doing it just for the sake of change itself, or is it something that is actually ordained? It is something that is actually going to take you to the next level, right? So that's the thing about this moon in Scorpio that I find to be interesting. It does make a nice little trine over to Saturn in the midst of all this. But of course, this is going to talk about, a level of responsibility that we have to have, especially with our emotions, to not necessarily just dump it on everyone. This could be a day where people might end up dumping their emotions on the people and not necessarily know how to, I guess, properly engage with people, if you will, if that makes sense, without like dumping all their stuff on each other. So just be wary of that sort of thing. There has to be a level of responsibility here because, like I said, Saturn is involved. Now, that's Wednesday. Right? So, and as you can see, pretty much towards the end of the day on Wednesday, Venus does enter that 29th degree, and we are going to see, going into Thursday, we're going to see the moon here at 29 degrees, and it's going to trine Neptune, and it's going to oppose the Venus-Jupiter conjunction. This is a pretty big fucking deal. Now, it's not every day that you get so much energy at the end of their respective sign that they occupy. But we have 29, 29, 29, 29, 11, 11, 11, 11. So this can be a rather manifesting moment or a moment of becoming, because a lot of times when people see like 11, 11, it's really more so about, you know, what is your current vibration? It's not necessarily like the sign of 1111 is more so like this is where you are currently. That's what it communicates. It's not necessarily communicating, you know, this is what you need to do. A lot of times people will just be looking for these angel numbers and whatever like that, looking for confirmation. This is a sort of moment here, which of course a lot of people are going to be asleep here. If you're in Europe, it's like the start of your day, mind you. If you're on the West Coast, you may be awake. East Coast people, you may be awake too. But this energy is still going to be with us throughout the day. Now, this is, like I said, a pretty big fucking deal. This moon in Scorpio here, right at the edge, looking for edge, and boy, has it found the edge. A trine over to Neptune. This is, like I said, we can make the biggest dreams come true right now, but we can also get caught up in the biggest traps and pitfalls right now if we're not careful. And with that Neptune that is sextiling, of course, this Venus and Jupiter. This is the two benefic planets. Benefic meaning that they're generally, when generally people think about them, generally it's much more positive, right? Jupiter is this expansion energy, this happy-go-lucky kind of Santa Claus kind of vibes. And then you have Venus, which is about love and beauty and things and adornments and treasures and all these sort of things that it traditionally rules, right? And Venus likes to be in Taurus, and it's getting ready to shift into Gemini. So it's getting ready to leave its home of Taurus, but it's leaving on a very, very, very positive note, especially with Jupiter here. Now, Jupiter, of course, is going to move into Gemini, and it's going to feel uncomfortable. I don't think Jupiter is going to necessarily be like, it's not like when some planets go into their detriment where they just can't stand it. Like whenever Mars goes into Libra, it just can't stand it. Jupiter going to Gemini, it's kind of weird. Jupiter going to Gemini is kind of like it's like the superstar musician, right? After that usually plays big stadiums and big crowds. They go back to like the freaking, restaurant that they started out at, right? They go back to the restaurant that they started out at in a small little town, whatever like that, and it can become awkward because they're going to attract a lot of people probably. The restaurant's probably going to be over capacity. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the wait staff and the owners and the workers there. The people that usually go to the restaurant, the regulars there, they're probably not going to be able to get in because Jupiter's going to bring all of his crazy fans with them and shit. Because Jupiter, when it goes into Gemini, it's essentially about how can you be a big fish in a small pond? That's pretty much what Jupiter and Gemini does. So, like I said, Venus conjuncting Jupiter here at the end of Taurus, though, this definitely can bring about some of the most beautiful realizations. But with that moon in Scorpio, it's like there is a level of sacrifice here. I think that's the other thing about Scorpio that people don't really think about is the level of sacrifice. In order to transform our life, in order to do the whole Phoenix Rising thing, there has to be some sort of give and take. There has to be some sort of transformation. There has to be a molting, if you will. Scorpions, they molt, right? A lot of animals will shed their skin. We shed our skin. It's not necessarily as a parent. Some people it is. It's not necessarily as a parent, but we shed our skin. Everything sheds. Everything molts, right? And that's the thing about this. This can be a beautiful shedding period with this opposition that the moon's involved in. And we got to remember, this is building up to a full moon, which is perfect because this is about a release. Generally, full moons are all about releases. So the fact that we have this moon here at the end of Scorpio, this is a massive shedding moment that we're going through, a massive molting moment. And I'm getting images of scorpions shedding, or a snake, or a deer where it sheds, it's like it regrows and sheds its antlers and stuff like that. Have you ever seen these pictures? Like, I don't know if I can show you guys, but like, that's kind of what I'm getting, especially considering the fact that when I think of a deer, I do think of Sagittarius, because I feel like the deer is sort of like a totem animal of Sagittarius. But like, deer shedding antlers. Yeah. Like, this is some gnarly stuff. Like, this is actually kind of wild when you like actually like look at this. Let's see if I can actually like share this with you guys though. Let's see. Properties, and let me go to that right there. Okay, boom. Like, y'all see this? Like, this is actually kind of wild, you know? And I'd have to imagine that generally whenever you're shedding, you know, you're going to be a little bit more emotionally, like, you know, just amped up a bit. You know what I'm saying? If you're going through something like this, I know generally when snakes are shedding, they're a little bit more amped up. You don't really want to bother them and stuff like that. That goes for a lot of animals. And the same thing could be said for humans. Like I said, even though we do physically shed, you know, we may not necessarily have this, you know, emotional, you know, upheaval, if you will. But you can say, like, if you're a woman, your menstrual cycle, right? You're shedding the uterine wall, right? I know as my that's what it is, right? It's a shedding period. So that's, and generally emotions, hormones, all this sort of stuff are raised, they are increased during this time. So that's in many ways what's happening here with this moon here at the end of Scorpio, making oppositions to this massive benefic energy at the end of Taurus, and Taurus rules animals. And well, some people say Aries. I think you can argue Aries or Taurus. I say Taurus more so. And then of course, like I said, trining Neptune. So like I said, this is a pretty big moment that we are going to be moving into. But this is sort of the image that I get in my head when I think about this moment and this full moon. It's actually like the shedding of a deer antler, right? It's like they'll even will fall off. Like, it's kind of wild when you think about it, right? Like, look at this, right? It's pretty freaking wild, you know? Like, look at that. Look at that. It's getting in his eye and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's got to be a pretty crazy experience. Like, imagine you came into the world as a deer, right? And then you experience this for the first time. You'd be like, yo, what the freak? Are you telling me my antlers are going to shed and they're going to have all this hanging skin and blood and stuff? That's gnarly as hell. But this is what they go through. And then this is in many ways what we're kind of going through. And I think it's interesting, of course, too, how this almost kind of even brings back a homage to all the Aries energy that we had in that new moon solar eclipse, ironically, because, you know, this is the head, right? Aries rules the head. So there's, you know, it kind of reminds me of that moment. Everyone thought that the new moon in Aries was a moment of beginnings. It was more of like you're like more of like a recognizing of who you really are, or do you know who you are? That's really what it was more about. It wasn't necessarily about this new great adventure that you're about to go on or whatever like that. This new self is like, no, it's like, who are you in the first place? You know, that's what it was about. But, you know, this is kind of what I see here, you know. And like I said, they more than likely, does like shedding antlers hurt the deer? Does it? That's a good question. Fortunately for deer, shedding their antlers does not hurt. The antlers are held on by the deer's head by a piece of skin called the pedicle. As testosterone levels decrease, this weakens the create separation between the antler and the bone. When the antler comes off, the pedicle completely covers the wound. As testosterone decreases, yeah, so hormone changes and balances and stuff like that. That makes sense. That makes sense. So yes, the velvet is soft and appealing, but at some point the deer needs to shed the material to reveal its new antlers. The shedding process is amongst the goriest sights in nature as the dense blood vessels burst and the velvet falls in red rags from the deer's rack of antlers. Crazy. Just insane. I remember when I first saw this, I was like, what in the world am I looking at? It was wild to me. So, but if we go back to the chart here. So, full moon. Here at 3 degrees. Well, technically 2 degrees, actually. It's technically 2 degrees. Full moon at 2 degrees of Sagittarius. It is making a nice sextile, of course, over to Pluto, which Pluto is about transformation. So how ironic is that? And of course, the sun here is coming off of its trine to Pluto. Well, it's loosening, but it's still coming off the trine to Pluto. And Venus is still conjunct Jupiter, getting ready to come into Gemini. So this is going to be a very powerful full moon. A very powerful full moon here at 2 degrees. And this can, like I said, this could be about releasing a lot of our, if we were to take the traditional way to look at full moons and how it's a moment of release, you know. Let's see, I'll save. Yeah, if we were to look at the traditional thing as far as like what a full moon is, yeah, it's about a time of release. And Sagittarius is all about beliefs. So what beliefs are you releasing? Yeah. This is a bit bigger than that. I will say that it's a bit bigger about what beliefs are you releasing today. This is a shedding moment. I don't think it's about this, like, you know, this, oh, I believe I'm going to shed my antlers. Like, no, you're going to shed them. You're going to shed on this full moon, on this Thursday. Because you have to shed. We got to get ready for Venus coming into Gemini. We got to get ready for Jupiter coming into Gemini. We got to get ready for the next year and what's going to come. And how things are about to pick up in speed and energy. That's the thing about this. Things have been moving slow for a while. Things are about to pick up in speed and energy. And and it's interesting because a lot of people have been wanting this. A lot of people have been wanting this, but do they even really know what's in store? Is the question. Let's look at the degree for this full moon, because I do like looking at the Sabian symbols. Sabian symbols. 2 degrees. Let's look at this. See. Properties. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's see. The symbols, yeah. So we're going to take a look at Sag 2. Let's look this up. 2 men playing chess. The symbol shows the ability or the necessity to indulge in strategic games, arguments, or competitions. There can be a strong sense of knowing how to maneuver situations in order to come out on top with an eye to possible outcomes. There's a need to be thoughtful and cautious, taking into account the wider picture. Impulsive acts with no forward planning can be risky. I just said this earlier. I literally just said that you don't necessarily want to act on impulse. You got to have some type of plan. It probably pays to not show your weak side, but do everything with the possible objective of winning. It can be difficult to relax in competitive environments. one often feels that they can let their guard down because they might be taken advantage of. Can't let their guard down. Take one step at a time and move with purpose and forethought. Strategic competition, seeing the picture several moves ahead, trying to knock out the opponent. Arguments, court battles, war strategies, matching wits, lawyers, divorces. Depending on pure luck. Yeah, this is not something that you want to just be lucky on. This is not This is not something that you want to just rely on luck. And Jupiter, in many ways, is involved with luck, but it's getting ready to move into Gemini. This is not about luck here, right? The moon is in Jupiter's home, but Jupiter's getting ready to come into its detriment. So this is not about luck. Underestimating the opponent's skill or strategy, bickering and trying to get the better, wanting to slay the opponent, not knowing when to stop. Yeah, I think this is really about how can we be a little bit more strategic in our life? How can we be a little bit more efficient in our life? I think we've been relying on chance a lot. We've been relying on impulse. This is going to be a time where we can start to plan things out. And because we are now in the mercurial Gemini and things are about to get rather mental, not in a bad way, but they're going to get mental, this time, this next 30 days especially, is going to really belong to the people that have the ability to adapt to their surroundings, not feel the need to just impulsively act on things, but can, like I said, adapt to their surroundings and understand the bigger picture in many ways. How can we see the bigger picture in our day-to-day reality? How can we see the bigger picture? I think that's an interesting thing about Jupiter because it is concerned with the bigger picture, right? And being that this is going to be a very Jupiter full moon, obviously, because this Jupiter is dispositing this moon, right? And the moon is dispositing Jupiter, so it's kind of it's an interesting mutual disposition, right? So there is this element where it's like we want to see the big picture, but it's about being able to see the big picture in our current state, in our current environment. This is not necessarily about going out there and trying to find something out there. I think the full moon in Sag is also going to be this interesting release point where we have to realize that it's not the solutions and the answers that we want is not way out there in some far away foreign land. It's not way up there. It's probably much, much, much more closer to home. And some people are going to be like, well, that's boring. That's boring. Why do I have to learn how to play chess? That's boring. Why do I have to learn strategy? That's boring. Can I just do something more exciting? Because this is boring. And that's really what we are at. And it's interesting, too, that you see this. Arguments, court battles, war strategies. Do I even need to mention the whole farce that is this Trump case with the hush money and everything? Do I need to even mention that? We all know what the outcome of that's going to be. Though I wouldn't be surprised if he still goes to jail over it, even though it does feel like a bit of a scramble right now from the Democrats. And you know me, I don't mind talking politics on here because honestly, I don't give a fuck about either side. I really don't. You know, there are aspects that I am more liberal on, and there are aspects where I'm more conservative on. But I think it's interesting that all this is happening here too, and that we get a full moon at this freaking degree. And this talks about arguments and court battles and war strategies, right? And that's the thing about this too. We almost have to tackle this as if we were at war. And that sounds a bit crazy, but if you were to tackle your life, your everyday life, you were to tackle it as if you were at war, that means the stakes are high. Because if you tackle it like you were at war, that means that if you fuck up, there's a good chance that you're going to die. Now, you know, not necessarily die in the literal sense, but I'm just saying, if you were to tackle things with that sort of mentality, imagine how more efficient you would be. You'd probably be a little bit more careful to do things, but, you know, not so careful to where you just don't act, but you'll be a lot more efficient. Things will have a sense of order to them as well. Things wouldn't be just being done willy-nilly. So we have to learn strategy right now. We have to learn a little bit more strategy right now. I would not be surprised if we see more divorces during this, especially with the moon opposing Jupiter and Venus while it's in Scorpio. This is like people who are looking for the most excitement in their relationships right now. Like the people that may be looking for the most excitement in their relationships, maybe they've been together for a while now, and maybe they haven't been able to create any excitement, but nothing's probably inherently wrong with the relationship. They just don't know how to appreciate the simplicity of things. And the lack of appreciation for the simplicity of things, especially when it comes to relationships, is going to kill fucking relationships. That moon's in Scorpio. Before it does this full moon, it will kill relationships if people can't appreciate the simplicity of things. You always have to go out. Like you always have to do this. Like you always, like your heart always has to be thumping when you see them or you think about them. Right? You get too caught up on that it always has to look this certain way. Then yeah, you can make some impulsive. People can make some impulsive decisions. People may cheat a lot. There might be a lot of cheating that happens this weekend or after this full moon. Just saying, these things you can kind of get caught up in these things if you're not careful. You know, you can kind of get caught up in these things if you are not careful. Let's see. That is what I wanted to get back to this. But like I said, 2 degrees, Sag moon, full moon, and that's how Thursday starts, mind you. How the day starts is with the full moon. At least here on the East Coast, right? I'm being called to draw a card for this full moon. Like right here at this moment, because it's just because of the intensity of what the moon just went through leading up to the full moon. I just feel like I need to draw a card to kind of provide a little bit more context to it all. Patience, young grasshopper. Patience. Especially with the sun in Gemini. This is like very youthful energy. Oh, we gotta do this, thing, gotta learn this thing, gotta learn that thing. It's very curious energy. Patience, young grasshopper. That's what this full moon is about. Patience. Let's draw an oracle card for it, shall we? I'm just going to draw a random oracle card for it as well. Grace and gratitude. Through gratitude, joy expands. This is about being grateful for the little things, for the simple things, right? This is not necessarily about the big, the bold, the magnanimous. This is about appreciating the simple things, appreciating a cup of coffee at the beginning of the day, really appreciating it. It may seem so mundane because you might get coffee every single day, but take time this day to actually experience a cup of coffee. Not just have a cup of coffee, but to experience a cup of coffee or to experience a conversation with your partner or your child or your cat or your dog or whatever like that. To experience these things. It's going to take on a whole nother element, a whole nother energy that will unlock a deeper understanding and a deeper gratitude for the simplicity of life and how in many ways we just simply take it for granted. All right. So, Thursday, we want to see, of course, his moon continue to move forward. Venus, of course, on this day, is going to move into Gemini. The moon moves into Gemini and joins up with the sun in Gemini. And this is going to be an interesting change as well, especially with Venus here at Gemini. Venus, of course, is concerned about, relationships and balance and love and all these sort of things. Moving into Gemini, this will give us a great opportunity to, this Venus and Gemini transit will give us a great opportunity to meet new people. Meet new people, meet new friends, meet new colleagues. New people tend to come into our life, like when Venus comes into this spot, right? It makes for things to be much more social. So this could be a day where maybe you decide to go out. I'm probably going to go out and do karaoke this night. So, things are going to be a little bit more social. You know what I'm saying? A little bit more fun when Venus comes into Gemini. It just left Taurus and stuff like that. Just had a great time in Taurus, making these conjunctions. It's coming off that conjunction to Jupiter. Now it's getting ready to kind of live it up in Gemini world, which is going to make it a little bit more curious. But that's the weird thing about Venus and Gemini, is that it can get a little too curious sometimes, especially when it comes to relationships. Venus and Gemini is very, very, very flirty. Very, very flirty. Which is why I think that full moon is important. I think it's interesting that the Sabian symbol even mentioned like divorces and lawyers and all this sort of stuff, because now things are about to get a little bit flirty when Venus comes to Gemini, right? Now, we're going to see, of course, moving into Friday, the moon's still going to be in Sagittarius. Jupiter is doing its best to get to Gemini. It's not going to quite reach Gemini just yet, but it will be getting close to it. We will see, of course, the moon is going to start to trine some of this Aries energy. It trines the North Node. It's going to trine Mars as well on Friday. It's interesting too, because the moment that it does trine over to Mars, it's going to square over to Saturn. So this is an interesting aspect. This moon in Sagittarius, like I said, it's wanting to have a little more fun, to kind of go out there and explore the possibilities. And Mars, of course, wanting to take action on them. But the square to Saturn is remembering to have spiritual responsibility. And is it inherently spiritual? That's the whole thing about this. Because we got to remember that there could be some cool opportunities that open up with the semi-sextile between Saturn and Mars, 30 degrees, right? There's could be some nice opportunities here. But the thing is that we want to go out, we want to explore, we kind of want to see what's really possible out there and stuff. We want to take some sort of action. Mars still has to conjunct Chiron. So it's still squished between the North Node and Chiron. It's still squished between destiny and then the wounds and the hurt and stuff. And that's the weird thing about it, because the North Node, when we look at the nodes in general, just a little tidbit on the nodes, the North Node is very much so etheric. It's very much so, it's kind of more spiritual, if you will. Its energy is not as obvious. Whereas the South Node, its energy is a lot more physical. We can kind of see the South Node a little bit more as it comes up. It's a lot more obvious and in our face. So the weird thing about this is that you have the moon in Sag, which is already very much so concerned with ideals and the possibilities and stuff like that. So trining this Mars is trying to, in many ways, and it's in its home, but it's also smack dab between, okay, how do I really express who I really am, despite the fact that I have these issues and these wounds and these traumas that I got to deal with, and Mars is trying to figure out that. Mars is not necessarily one to try and balance out. Like now that smack dab between Chiron and North Node, it's trying to balance out these two different aspects. And that's what Libra energy is. That's not what Mars likes to do. Mars likes to just go for it. But now Mars is having to kind of balance out these energies and trying to figure out how to exist within this oscillation between the Chiron and North Node energies. So this moon, like I said, now that it's going to be squaring Saturn, we have to be sort of reminded, it's like, okay, it's a spiritual in nature. How can I take some spiritual responsibility here? I can build these cool things in my life, obviously, but these dreams, are they going to just stay dreams? Are we going to be able to overcome some of the hurdles with that Chiron there in Aries? Remember, I call Chiron the key to your superpowers in many ways. Really, Chiron is sort of like that traumatic event that unlocks your superpowers. So it's not like this is like a door that we go necessarily willingly like wanting to open, if you will. This is sort of something that just, especially with the North Node is here, it's more like ordained, like it's going to happen, right? You know what I'm saying? So this is something that's sort of like destiny, if you will. So I think this is about like, we can kind of look at a day like Friday and maybe, you know, you don't want to curse your circumstances. You don't want to make yourself into a victim because you're like, well, this thing happened to me. This thing that happened to me, of course I'm going to be like this person. Of course I'm going to act this way because I've set up these different responses based off of what's happened to me and as a means to kind of protect myself, if you will. Well, if you want to believe that, you can. And there's probably an element of truth to that. But do you have to stay there is another story. Or can we see the lessons, the spiritual lessons here with that Saturn and Pisces of why these things may be happening to you or why you feel like these things may be happening to you, right? Now, we're going to, of course, continue to move this forward. We're going to see Venus make the trine over to Pluto as well on Friday. Interesting here, of course, Pluto getting ready to retrograde back into Capricorn. It's still the only planet that is in retrograde too. So kind of a nice harmonious moment here between Venus and Pluto. And Venus, you know, score-wise is actually rather strong. It's actually at +8 still. If I were to just show you guys that real fast. Let's see, properties. Astro sheets. Is it? It's not gonna actually show me. Let's see. Oh, there you go. Boom. There you can see it. The sheets right here. You see that Venus is at +8, Mercury's at +7, Mars is at +5, Saturn's at +4, Jupiter's at +1. Ooh, but look at that. Sun and Moon are at -5. -5. So that's the weird thing about this. I think there's an element here where it's like trying to rely too heavily on the moon is going to be a little bit unreliable, especially with it being out of declination. It's at 27 degrees south, so it's going to be out of bounds. So emotionally, things are going to be a little bit more hyperbolic on this day. And this, of course, is happening while the moon is in trine to Chiron. Right? It doesn't surprise me that while Venus is trining Pluto, that the moon is trining Chiron. It doesn't surprise me at all that that's happening. Crisscross applesauce. Makes for a very interesting energy. So I think this is really, like I said, about seeing the opportunities and the beauty in the small things. Seeing the beauty in the everyday things. Not necessarily, you know, trying to create this massive, big, trying to do this whole big legendary thing that the moon and Sag wants to do because it just wants to find the fun in things. I think this is about building the legends, building the legendary aspects of our life and not just feeling like they're just going to come down, right? Not just feeling like we're going to walk outside and the person that's supposed to be our soulmate or our twin flame is just going to show up randomly and just going to be there. And there's going to be like a halo of sunlight that's around them and stuff. And it's going to be like, oh, I feel like that's what this is about. Like we want that moment. People are desperately looking for the single moment that's going to change their life forever. When the change is something, and this was being taught to us this entire Taurus season, that the change is what you do every single day. It's not something that's just going to happen. There are moments like that where things do shift, but it's not, that's the thing. A moment like that can happen, but if you don't sustain it, then change can't really occur. Like you can get the call to get you a dream job, But then if you're so caught up on just the excitement of the moment and you don't go to the interview or to the second interview, and then you got to start to train, and then you got to go through that whole process and everything like that, and maybe you're super excited at first, but then after several months you start to settle into it, and then you're going to be like, oh wow, this isn't as the excitement kind of wears off a little bit because you get into the daily grind. And I think people are like afraid of that or something. They want it to be exciting all the time. You know, I'm a Scorpio, so I get it. I'm a Sag rising, I get it. You know what I mean? But it's about appreciating the daily grind. I think that's really what this comes down to as well. So, properties. I'm going to shift this back to... Yep. So, now, of course, going into Sunday, we're going to see this moon continue to make its way through Sag. It is, of course, going to square over to Saturn. Oh, not Saturn, excuse me, Neptune. It's going to square over to Neptune and quincunx Jupiter before it comes into Capricorn. And before Jupiter comes into Gemini. Because Jupiter will come into Gemini on this day. You'll see right towards, you saw that shift right there. So between 6:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 7:22, we see Jupiter ingress into Taurus. Oh, no, excuse me, not Taurus, Gemini, Jesus. And of course, if we look at the sheets and the scores, we will see that Jupiter goes from +1 to -4. Just like that. It went from +1, which was not even that much, to -4. Just like that. Just like that. The moon is now in its detriment at 4 degrees, starting to make a quincunx over to the sun, right? So it's now now the moon's like in this awkward place, and it's still out of bounds too, right? And I think this is going to come down to is like, okay, now that we've kind of felt these changes are coming, the winds of change are here, and things are moving forward. It's not moving exactly the way I thought it was going to, but things definitely are shifting. Now this moon in Capricorn is like, okay, how can I actually build from this? And I think that's really what this moon in Capricorn is going to come down to, especially with Jupiter shifting into Gemini, because you're going to feel this shift a bit more because Jupiter is a big energy, right? Now we have Venus here and the sun and Jupiter. And now Mercury at this point is just like really excited to get back because now when Mercury conjuncts Jupiter, Mercury's going to be like, you're at my house now. Right, you're at my house. This is the interesting moment. If Mercury is like the reporter, if you will, and Jupiter's kind of like Mercury's boss. If you think about like from the whole like I'm thinking like Spider-Man, right? This is something that a lot of people would kind of understand, right? So Spider-Man and his yeah. Let's see. This moment right here, this is kind of what we're heading into. And this is sort of just like I said, it's coming, but it's not here just yet. But this is sort of where, let's see, we are kind of heading into is this sort of moment right here, right? Spider-Man is Gemini, right? Spider-Man is Mercury in this case, right? J. Jonah Jameson is Jupiter, right? And this is going to be the moment where he enters into his world. J. Jonah Jameson is about to enter into Spider-Man's world. This is sort of like Jupiter is not used to writing that way. Jupiter is used to just going out and experiencing the thing. And it's going to sound really bad. This is going to sound really bad. And some of y'all, I'm about to expose Sag right now. I'm about to expose Sag. Sag takes credit for the group project, but doesn't do any work. Now Jupiter has to do some work. Jupiter actually has to do a little bit of research. Jupiter actually has to go out and talk to like regular people. Jupiter rather just talk to fun people. But now Jupiter has to go out and talk to regular Joe Schmoes. And Jupiter does not want to do that. That's why he goes -4. But now he's going to be in Mercury's world. He's going to be in Spider-Man's world. Like, this has been Jupiter. He's been laughing the whole time. And now he's about to be like, oh crap, now I gotta write the story. I'm just the one that collects them and then gets the big paycheck and I get all the credit for it and stuff. Now he's gonna have to be like, oh shit, I gotta actually do the writing. I actually gotta do the work now. That's where we are heading, y'all. That's what's gonna be weird about this Jupiter in Gemini. Is that if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to really go far and expand your life. And with the moon in Capricorn, at this moment, this is going to be like, how in the world do I build from this? You know? And there's going to be a level of like, we have to still learn some resiliency here. Like Capricorn can be very resilient. So we have to learn how to be resilient. We have to learn how to take command in our life. How can I take command of the situation that may seem unfair or that may put me out of my element? Because now you're dealing with planets that are going to be more so out of their element, right? You're going to be dealing with more planets out of their element, right? Moon out of his element, right? Uranus is still out of its element. Jupiter now is going to be out of its element. And we already saw that the sun isn't necessarily happy here in Gemini. Not right now, anyways. It probably would prefer to be in a fire sign. But it's this. That's the other thing, too. The sun is this really big, expansive energy as well. That's the interesting thing about it. So, you know, now that we have all this energy that has shifted here, the only planet that's feeling great in Gemini is Venus. And Venus is just going to want to be a flirt this whole time. Venus is just going to want to flirt. It's like, how do we solve these problems? Oh, let's just flirt our way to the top, right? That's what Venus and Gemini will do. That's what I'm saying. So if Venus, Sun, and Jupiter were doing a group project, Jupiter is going to try to not do too much work. Venus is probably going to be flirting with Jupiter, and the Sun's going to be stuck doing all the work, especially because the Sun is leading the pack now. Right? And the sun is having to do the work while it's not feeling the best. So that's the weird thing about this. It's like, this is a time where we can feel the winds are shifting and the winds are changing. And I think it's overall going to be positive. But I think it's also one of those things where it's like, you have to learn how to be okay in uncomfortable situations and learn how to be able to adapt to them. Gemini, it's all about adaptation and flying on the go. Like, things may switch, things may change up, but it's about how do you adapt to these situations. So we'll see as we come into Sunday here. We want to see that moon is going to continue throughout Capricorn. We'll see the squaring of the nodes. So that moon, of course, is going to square the south node and the north node here on Sunday, right? I think as far as days go, I feel like Sunday may be a rather chill day overall. I mean, we will also see the moon square over to Mars as well. By this point, it's going to be at 20 degrees. So that's actually going to be right towards the end of the day. So I don't feel like Sunday's going to be like a massive day for stuff. And generally, things don't seemingly happen a lot on the weekend and stuff. But of course, you saw what happened this past Sunday. International news-wise, we saw what happened this past Sunday, if you're aware. So, and just the incredible shift that that's going to have on the world, with the Iranian president perishing in a helicopter crash. So just because the weekend is where the news goes to die doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen on the weekend, right? I probably feel like it'd probably be more of a Saturday thing. But on Sunday, things could pop off as well. You never know. But we'll see. Coming into Monday, we're going to see that moon is going to trine the remainder of this Taurus energy. Of course, it did trine Mercury as well. But we're going to see this moon trine over to Uranus, sextile Mars, sextile Chiron. And by the end of the week, coming into Tuesday, we're going to see the moon meet up with Pluto, and it's going to trine this Jupiter energy, right? And this is going to be an interesting moment because now we have a lot of air energy. We had a lot of earth energy, but now we have a lot of air energy. And ironically, the planets that are in earth right now rule air signs. Mercury rules Gemini and Uranus rules Aquarius. So that is kind of the weird thing about this. It's like there is this whole thing where we are going to kind of be feeling out of our element and we're being told adapt. That's the weird thing about this. A lot of planets are out of their element. The only planets that aren't out of their element is Pluto. No, actually, no, not Pluto, excuse me. The only ones that aren't out of their element is Neptune and Mars. That's it. And I guess Venus, too. Although Venus does rule Taurus and it rules Libra, so it can deal with air as well. So those are the only ones that aren't really, that are still in their element. And Neptune is still arguably the strongest one. Because Mars is with Chiron and it's with the North Node. And Venus is with a Jupiter in detriment and a Sun that's sort of feeling a little off. So it's going to be an interesting week. I think it can be a very powerful and positive week overall. But as I've said, we can feel that things are starting to shift. The energy is starting to spread out. And because it's been so compact, I think people kind of got used to the compact energy. And now that things are starting to spread out, it's almost going to be like people are going to want to kind of go back to that energy and almost like desire it and clamor for it because it provided like a sense of comfort. Like maybe people learned how to live and adapt in a much more compact world. But when things are starting to spread out and information starts to drop, because Gemini is all about information, now that Jupiter, Venus, and the Sun is here, information is about to start getting revealed more and more and more. And it is going to expand our view on things in many ways. But because it's Gemini, it's about what can you do on the local level. That's really what it's going to come down to. And how is that going to shift? I think Jupiter and Gemini is going to teach us all a lesson on how we take things for granted and we think that, okay, yeah, those crazy things are happening over there, but they're not going to happen here. Oh, they can happen here. They can happen here. Jupiter is going to bring the party to the local. And we're going to have to learn how to adapt as things start to spread out a little bit more and energies aren't as compact. I think we've learned how to live in the compact world, but when things start to spread out and information starts to become much more and we start to learn more things, how are we going to deal with it, especially from a mental standpoint, because this is Gemini, this is dealing with the matters of the mind. So I think that this is going to be a time where we may see people be a little bit more anxious, a little bit more apprehensive. But I think it's also going to be a cool time where it's like if you utilize the powers of your mind, you can really manifest some pretty freaking cool things and meet some really cool people. But it's going to be about whether or not you can overcome these mental roadblocks that you may have in your life. I think we all have mental roadblocks somewhere, right? But that's really what this is going to come down to. So I'll draw some cards for the entire collective. And I trust that this message will assist you on your journey this week. I think it'll be a pretty cool week and stuff. And may even do just a check-in with you guys as it continues on. I think it's interesting that we get back-to-back intense Saturdays, You have one with a major Jupiter-Sun conjunction, which was probably much more subtle. I think a lot of us astrologers were definitely pumping it up and as a big deal, and it was a big deal but it might have not necessarily felt like a big deal. But then this Jupiter moving into Gemini, you might feel that one a little bit more. It's going to feel like a fish out of water. Like Sagittarius is especially, you're about to feel like a fish out of water. Y'all really are about to feel like a fish out of water. Other mutable signs where this, of course, is like squaring you. Virgos, I don't think this will affect you as much as it will affect Pisces and Sag. Geminis are going to have they're going to have a lot of fun with this energy, because Gemini is going to be like, aha, now you're in my world, Jupiter. Like Gemini is going to have a very fun birthday period. I'm just going to say that. Geminis are going to keep eating good. Just saying. You know what I mean? I think also that's the other thing about Gemini is that when I think of Gemini, I do think of the trickster, I do think of the jokester, and we have to learn how to be able to laugh. We have to learn how to be able to laugh again. I think there's an element here where we can be overly sensitive to things. We have to learn how to be able to laugh and make fun of things again. You know what I mean? Not gloss over things, but to be kind of have a sense of humor about things. Laugh. Be a little bit more lighter. Be a little bit brighter. That's why I call this the winds of change. That's why I made this the thumbnail. It's like, yeah, things may seem a little bit weird and intense and maybe a little bit out of the element, but hey, she's rocking and rolling. We got the god Zephyrus back there chilling as well. It's like, hey, we got this. And I think that's what this is. That's what this comes down to. Is like, can you, in the face of this, can you adapt? Can you keep moving forward? Can you stay focused? Can you smile often? That's really what this comes down to. So, let's see what we got for everybody. We'll draw a couple of cards for y'all. So I have the card of Harmony. This is the Ten of Cups. I love this. This is beautiful. Harmony. I have that followed by Possibilities in reverse, or the Two of Wands in reverse. Yeah, I think this is about, you got to be able to see, and I think the possibilities aren't going to open up unless you find that sense of peace within you and that sense of harmony and start to feel whole within you. It's one of those things where it's like, we can want these things and manifest these things so much, but it's like, is the clamoring for that, is that a reflection of a lack of inner peace, or is it a reflection of something that you actually really do value? Clamoring for something because you feel like you don't have it is one thing, but when you already know your worth and you already know your value, especially from like an emotional standpoint, with the Harmony card, it's like, achieve the harmony and the peace first. Those possibilities will come once you do that. That's really what this comes down to, right? I'm gonna draw another card here in the middle. I have the card of Aloneness in reverse, or the Hermit in reverse. This isn't really a time to be hermiting it up. This is not really a time to be hermiting it up. Especially with Venus going into Gemini, the Sun's here, and now Jupiter's going to be here. This is not a time to hermit. This is not a time to hermit. This is not a time to just only talk to people through the internet. This is a time to get out there and to meet people and talk to people and stuff. At the very least, put yourself out there more. Learn about people. Learn about your neighbors, because you're going to become a lot more acquainted with your neighbors over the next 4 to 5 years. So many people just live in their bubbles. They go to work, they go to the grocery store, they go home, and then they live on the internet. And I think the internet's great. Through the internet, I have met people from all different parts of the world. And I think it's awesome, even though I haven't met them in person. Hopefully, with a transit like this, I can meet some people in person. But that's the other thing, too, with Jupiter and Gemini. It's not really about big travels. It's not really about big vacations. It's not really about, especially not necessarily going overseas. It's not necessarily about going to other countries. It's about finding the adventure, like, close to home. Gemini is near Cancer. It's about finding adventures, like, close to home. It's not necessarily about going way out there to find something, But, yeah, don't spend this time alone. Spend this time to connect with people. That's really what it comes down to. I'll draw one more card. Ooh. I have the Master, right? How can you be the master in your own life? And then this is something that we are all asking ourselves. And you know what? And that's the thing too. What looks like being the master for you may look different from someone else's version of it. And instead of trying to enforce your ideals into the other person because it works for you, just appreciate that they are stepping into their masterhood and their mastery. That's really what this comes down to, right? I notice that I say that a lot. That's what this really comes down to. It's like, I think we all have different sayings that we probably say a lot. That's just one of the ones I've been saying quite a bit lately here on these videos. So, and the funny thing about mastery is that it's not something that happens overnight. You thought that any master of their craft got to that spot overnight because they found a genie and then they just wished it. Then at that point, you just take it for granted. When you need to stop looking for genies in your life. Stop looking for like those 3 wishes, if you will. You know? It's about building. It's about the day-to-day grind, if you will. That's another thing I say a lot, is it, if you will. Alright. Choosing your path. All is possible. I love that. All is indeed possible. So yeah, you can definitely dream big, but like I said, don't necessarily expect it to just come up and just plop right into your lap immediately. That's not what this is about. We also have the card of cleansing waters, purification activates vibrant life force. Yeah, so I talked about how earlier in this, how we were kind of going through this shedding moment, this purification moment. I think that's what this whole moon in Scorpio is honestly really about. It's like this whole purification moment, especially with the opposition to Venus and Jupiter and all this sort of stuff. So I think it's going to be a very powerful and positive week, and I trust that this message will assist you on your journey this week so you can know how to better navigate with these celestial energies. But in any event, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this week's Cosmic Convergence right there. I hope that you all enjoyed it. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. I definitely appreciate it. I did add a Jupiter and Gemini transit service on my website. So I definitely recommend you guys getting that. Jupiter is going to be in Gemini for the next year, technically 13 months. And that service is going to be designed to help you. It's going to be all about Jupiter and Gemini and what it means for you and how you can navigate it and how you can expand in your life and how you can navigate that particular transit over the next year. So if you'd like to get that reading, definitely check out the link in the description below and book a reading there. But y'all take care, stay blessed, have a wonderful, wonderful week. Remember to keep moving forward, stay focused, and smile often. It's like one of my old taglines I used to say, so I kind of feel like bringing that one back. But yeah, this has been fun. This has been great, and I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.